Thanks for tuning in. This is the Learn with John Eick podcast, and it's day 112. 112. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Remember that? If you don't, it's okay. I don't even know where it's from. Must be from Sesame Street. All right, it's day 112, my 180-day drive to work and school. You know, the flowers are starting to bloom. The rains seem to have subsided. We're heading into the California, Sacramento Valley springtime. One day blue skies, next day a little hazy fog, but like the flowers are starting to bud on some of the trees, and it's that time of year. Now, I don't know what that means to you, but that's interesting. It's an interesting thought here around context, that like when I say, ooh, the flowers are starting to bloom, we're heading into spring, like what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you professionally? If you are a regular year-round 50-week employee with 2 weeks of paid vacation that happens at different times throughout the year, plus you get the 12 federal holidays off, right? Whatever they are. That's what your work experience, maybe spring doesn't mean anything to you professionally. But if you're on the edu side of the house, if you're in this cyclical Groundhog's Day of like the year starts here and ends here, it's funny. We talk, the end of the year means something to us because we move a cohort up the ladder, and we're typically stationary. I'm a third grade teacher. I get a third grade cohort. They come to me. I push them up to fourth grade. I turn around. I grab a second grade cohort. I drag them into third grade. The kids keep moving up the ladder, but I stay right where I'm at. It's such a factory line, assembly line scenario. I wonder if that's where it comes from, right? Actually, I know that where it comes from. I remember this. What's the name of that guy, that Russian guy who came to the United States in the early 20th century and influenced the way we educate youth in these cohort models. It's funny, as I unpack this, it's hard to even imagine another model. But of course there's other models. There's other ways of doing everything. There's other ways of conceptualizing the work we do. Anyway, it's fascinating. It's just not, I do this, I start rambling, and I don't realize that that's where I'm going. Where I started was like, it's spring, and what does that mean to us in edu? It means something different depending on the context. But for a lot of us on this handoff cycle, my kids who I received that were like big second graders, and I turned them into third graders, are now like little fourth graders. And I can see that in my classroom and on the playground. And, that means something at each grade level. For the kindergartner or the kindergarten teacher, you got little students in there now. You got like, okay, we're 112 days into this gig. Y'all know what to do and what learning kind of looks like. And we're starting to do it. We're starting to be, students at this point with some legit academic skills. You could count to 100 at this point. You're using, block 10 counting, all of it. If you're a fifth grade teacher though, you're like, oh my God, these kids have just turned into middle schoolers right in front of my eyes. And if you're an eighth grade teacher, you are dealing with typically like, oh, these kids are now like the queens and kings of the school. They're like walking around with their shoulders back, kind of cocksure about like that they're all the business. But you're handing them off to like become freshmen, bottom of the heap of the high school pile, the high school dog pile that is high school. It's the fascinating time, spring, and it comes with its challenges, but I want to also like recognize it comes with these amazing rewards that is like the fruits of our labor. But sometimes we get caught up in like the daily grind, the burn, all the things where we're like, God, I can't see the positive through all the hard times. And there is so, look at your students today and remember where they were when you met them in August, and you're like, dang, I'm good at my job, right? You should be able to look at those kids and be like, okay, I get it. Bobby, Cindy, and Susie, who I've got in a small group, because they're, still needing lots of kind of tier 2 intervention to get them where they need. Yeah, I get it. They're struggling. But honestly, they've come a long way. looking across the class at the growth that they've had since August really is something we don't take enough time to put a little pride on. It's funny, I was telling somebody yesterday that how we feel about ourselves should really not be much influenced by the way others treat us or speak to us, meaning that it's more important to be proud of ourselves and find reasons to be proud of ourselves than it is to seek the approval or the pride of others. If we're constantly seeking approval or fearing disapproval, it affects our our own self-worth. And the idea that, like, hey man, I look in the mirror, that person looking back at me, that's the most important opinion that matters. And we're hard on ourselves, but we should also take time to remind ourselves. Like, I wish we could all do a little analysis right now. Like, hey, it's February, I don't know what day it is. It's sometime after Valentine's Day. I've spent 112 days of this school year designing lessons to make sure my kids grow. And I get it. Somebody wants to look at data, and somebody wants to talk about things that aren't going well. And somebody on my team thinks they're doing better than I'm doing. But like, let me just cancel out all the noise that is the rest of the world, and just look in the mirror for a minute and be like, okay, I know what I've been facing this year, and I'm going to look across my roster. And for high school teachers, the 192 kids, and for a kindergarten teacher, that's 22 kids, but they're there all day and they got multiple content areas. I'm going to look across my kids, and I'm going to just take a day to reflect on, like, where's that kid started, and where have they come, and where have they grown. And if you recognize that, you're going to find, I think, a lot of reasons to be proud. And look, even like with the basketball game, a player who plays their heart out and really helps the team win doesn't always fill the stat sheet with points, rebounds, and assists. Sometimes it's a person who plays really well and helps the team win. It doesn't show up on the scoreboard, and that's okay. But that person should know what they contributed to the win. And I think it's the same for all of us in EDU. Like, don't get stuck in the game theory that is traditional public school. It's about standardized test scores and cohort matriculation and promotability. Those things are important. I get it, check, whatever. But for your own personal self-worth, like, only you know the story and the journey of each of the children that you've poured into. And I think you need to take stock of where they were on August 5th and where they are, sometime around Valentine's Day, and recognize, hey man, that work that you've done, of course, it's affected this arbitrary scoreboard that somebody else has developed for all of us to measure our progress, but our self-worth can't be defined by the game theory or the scoreboard that's developed by somebody outside of the experience that we're playing. Because the truth is, we're here playing our game, and there's a second game going on. I get it. It's the game that the game theorists and the scoreboard developers, the state of California, the admin, the board, whoever it is, there is a game that they're asking us to play, and yes, we should play that game. But there's also a second game. It's the game that we are playing in our field, and we have to recognize what's a win. Where are the points that you scored that are not going to make it to the scoreboard developed by somebody else? It's funny. It's spring, and the flowers are starting to bloom, and I'm like, in my job, I got some innovations that I'm working on that are like, I think, some pretty cool next level stuff. And when I say innovations, it's not technology. Right now in the modern context in 2023, a lot of my innovations are like how we meet the needs of staff in reaching their own personal goals of work-life balance, how to keep staff engaged in this really awesome work that is education without like crushing their souls and sapping the life out of them. I'm working on some of that stuff, and I'm already out in the next year in my brain and noodling on things, what comes next. And so I got my own little scoreboard I'm working on, and I try to tie my scoreboard to the scoreboard that's expected of me as well. And I would encourage you to do the same. Find your self-worth based on, in part, a scoreboard that you develop for yourself. a scoreboard that you recognize what's important. All right, that's my riff. I'm heading into school right now. I see a lot of people. I'm smiling. I'm waving. Bell's about to ring. People running. I love it. It's like the Jaws music when the bell rings, like dun 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 dun. People just running and screaming. All right, my name's John. You can find me on Twitter at John_Eick. I'll catch you next time.